All right, we are live. Welcome to the Photography Masterclass live Q&A session. Will and I are here in the studio. Sam is coming in through Skype from up north in the Bay Area, and we're just going to wait for a few people to join live to make sure that we're all sounding good. Make sure that, how about leave a comment in the chat and let us know if you can hear us, if we're coming in loud and clear.
Just testing it. Testing. A little delay.
Sam, let's see if we can get Sam in here. Sam, can you chat or talk to us? I don't know if we're going to see you.
Hey everyone, excited for today's chat. I'm just a Skype logo, like that.
Are we hearing? I don't know if we're hearing Sam through the...
I gotta wait because it's so delayed.
Yeah, so we're sorry everyone, we were just doing some technical difficulties. 21 people here. Say what's up in the chat while we're getting everything set up. Do you hear Sam though? Oh yeah. Okay, so we do hear Sam through Skype. We should.
I think it's just coming from the...
Oh, is it? Okay.
I don't know if we're hearing Sam.
So okay,
maybe
everyone.
Just turn up the volume on our...
Yeah. So everyone, well, thank you for bearing with us as we get started. We are going to get this down to a science before the next live Q&A, but today we are super excited to have you here. We're going to be going through a bunch of stuff, so if you have any questions, feel free to chat them in the comments on this video. We're also going to be trying to get everyone in the group. Thank you for your patience. I know a lot of people have been joining the group. We've got over 500 people in this group, 730 members so far. That's awesome. So really building a great community. Let me go through our agenda today. So today we're going to be doing a Q&A from some of the questions that we've received in the Facebook group and from the course that we wanted to just go over, people who submitted their questions beforehand. Then we're going to be doing some housekeeping, talking about some of the updates in the course, also the contest that you guys are able to be a participant in. And then we're going to do some photo reviews. So this is something that we're going to test out in this live Q&A. We just picked a few photos at random that were posted to the group. We're going to be critiquing them, giving our advice, talking about why we love them, maybe how we can make them even better. And maybe in the next live sessions, we'll have some sort of submission practice where people can actually submit their photos to be critiqued during the live show. So right now we're just going to be picking on people kind of at random. so we'll see how that goes. And then we're going to be opening it up to general questions from the audience. So we will try to get to your questions while we go through the rest of these things, but if you can wait, if you have a big question till the end, we're going to be opening up to the entire audience at the end. So again, everyone who's here, comment, let us know where you are listening from and how you're doing today. Will, how's it going?
Good, it's good. Look, it says sounds great in Scotland.
Sounds great in Scotland.
We're
Man,
in Scotland.
that's awesome.
What time is it over there? It's kind of late, no?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't even know what a good time is to do a live stream. And maybe if you comment in the chat, if you're from around the world, let us know what time it is and if this is a good or bad time, and we'll kind of adjust accordingly next time we do this.
Yeah, it's about midday in Los Angeles right now, so.
Yeah, it's like in the afternoon for us, but we want to make it good for everyone. So.
And San Francisco, right, Sam?
Same time in San Francisco. So welcome, John. Welcome to everyone who's... Wow, we got a lot of comments so far.
Yeah.
Man, everyone. Alex, Lena, Robin, Lee, loud and clear in the UK, Alberta. Awesome. Austria, Costa Rica in the house. Francisco, Siegfried, welcome. We're so excited to have you. We hope you guys are enjoying, and girls are enjoying the Photography Masterclass. And so let's dive right into it. So we've got some questions, and these were posted in the group. And let's see if I can do this. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see that question. This was a question that was posted, and it was just, how do you find settings that you used on your photos from the camera when you're editing your photos? Like once you bring in the photos into the computer, what's the best way to see what aperture, what lens you were using? And then also, how do you put these settings on the photo itself? And I'll get the name of... So you use Lightroom, yeah.
I do it two different ways. If I'm in Lightroom, actually I think there's a shortcut. Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's if you press I, or you can go up to the View menu and you can have it display metadata, or you can find the window that says metadata and it'll list everything out there. If you want to do it quick, I know I use Apple Computer, so it might be a little different, but when you open up a photo in preview, you can actually hit Command I, and all the metadata will come up for what f-stop, what everything, lens, focal length, all that stuff. But those are the two ways I do it.
Yeah, generally in like the documents or whatever, if it's the documents or in your on your computer, you should be able to bring up like right click and then bring up more information and see it. In terms of putting that on a photo, what I would do is with most photo editors, you can create a watermark. And either one of two things. Some photo editors allow you to actually add text onto the image itself, just like a text editor. But like in Lightroom, you could add text via a watermark. And I believe, gosh, we're going to have to create a tutorial on this because I believe there's a way to automatically bring in the settings from your camera to the watermark so that you don't have to be like writing it out for every individual photo.
Oh, that's cool.
Because that would be a pain to be writing it out for every photo. Sam, anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I actually remember, and I'll go back through the video, through the class on Facebook, but someone had commented that they had done that and used a specific photo editing app that automatically did that for them. And the name of the program is escaping me right now, but it does exist, and I know there is a faster way than just having to go through and manually type it out each time on a watermark.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool.
All right.
Yeah, if people can comment if they can hear Sam, we're bringing him through Skype, but it might be just coming. His audio might just be coming through the computer speakers. All right, so next question. This was a great question from Lisa Winters. What kinds of photography are we passionate about? She was talking about how she was kind of surprised about how many different styles of photography there are, from portrait photography to landscape to event and everything in between. So Sam and Will, I'll let you guys take it. What are your favorite styles of photography right now?
Oh man, I'm kind of all over the place. I think I kind of stick to a lot of like journalistic style photography. I would also say that even my wedding photography is way more on the side of like journalistic, man on the street, sort of like docu sort of style of shooting. That's kind of what I've always been interested in shooting. But it's really funny because when I'm on Instagram, I actually really like looking at portraits of people, like just photos of people in their different areas. And Instagram is such a good place to just scour the basically the internet for styles of photography that you're interested in, stuff you want to check out. I think I spend a lot of my photography research and time mostly on Instagram more than anything else. But those are sort of the styles that I've really like gotten myself into. I've never really gotten into nature photography, and when I was younger, I never got into landscape photography, and maybe it's because I'm getting older and more patient that I've started to come around to landscape photography. It might also be just seeing Sam's landscape photography because it's so good. I always seem to like want to push it more. I think your style of photography and your art sort of changes with you as you go through time, and that's sort of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Sam, we're going to bring you back. I hear the sound is muffled. We boosted the audio a little bit. Hopefully this will help.
Oh, yeah, much louder. Okay, so for me, landscapes, I've always enjoyed doing landscapes just because I enjoy being out in nature. I enjoy backpacking and doing all those types of things and that process of taking photos out there. But really, portrait photography for me, like Will was saying on Instagram, like I love sort of seeing those images that tell an entire story and that you're seeing more of a culture, seeing, a more intimate moment between people. And it's not always a posed portrait, but more so the candid portraits are the ones that really speak to me and that I've been personally trying to move towards in my own work. But I just like being out in nature. I like going backpacking and whatnot. So taking those landscapes is just enjoyable because it reminds me of those trips that I take. Nice.
And I would say that I just like taking pictures of, family and events. And I would say that I would love to get more into wildlife photography. I think that's something that as we went through this course, I was more and more interested in. And just because I love hiking and being out in nature, just wildlife photography is something that I want to get into. And of course, drone photography is something that I've been getting a little bit more into as well. We got some great questions coming in, and we're going to be answering some of them, but let's get through a couple of these. We got a few more from before. One of them was, do we have resources for helping to buy a camera? So let me just switch this really quickly. And we definitely do. So this was a question a lot of people have been asking about what cameras they should buy. In section 9 of the course, we have a whole section on how we think you should go about buying a camera, things to keep in mind, what the best camera is for your budget. And so if you have watched that section, if you haven't watched that section, please go ahead and do that. If you have and you still have follow-up questions, feel free to leave us some questions in the Q&A or here in the Facebook group. But definitely watch that section because that should help you get a good idea for how to buy your next camera. Let's see. Okay, this is a good one. This one, Will was doing a little research, I hope.
Yeah.
Is there a better lens than the Canon 70-200 millimeter L series with no image stabilization for a similar price? I believe the price was, I forget what the price was, but this was a question, I think, in our
I was on Facebook
group. Yeah. So do you have any other alternatives?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this was brought up, and Sam actually has probably more physical experience with this, but just from what I know, the 70-200 L series from Canon is like wonderful. Obviously, it's like one of the better lenses. So I feel like if you can afford it and get your hands on it, that's the way to go. But obviously, like, it's a very expensive lens, and not everyone can afford that. But Sam should weigh in on this too. But Tamron and I think Sigma also makes sort of a relevant, similar lens. I think one of them may be at an f4, which, you know, if you're shooting outside and outdoors, not a problem. You're still gonna, when you're shooting at 200 millimeters in f4, you're still gonna get that wonderful bokeh. But I think on the other end, low light situation, it's not as ideal as a 2.8. But, you know, that's what you're sacrificing with the cost. Obviously, the 70-200 at a 2.8 is going to be the most expensive you're going to deal with. But Tamron and Sigma are both wonderful companies. I've used third-party lenses all the time, and I've never really noticed a huge difference.
Yeah.
If you're doing video, that's a whole other thing. There might be some breathing and aspects there, but we're not here to talk about that. The IS is better on Canon for sure. I haven't shot with it enough to really compare, but I know that the Canon IS is probably one of the more superior ISs that I've dealt with.
Yeah.
I don't know, Sam, if you have any other follow-up to that. Because I know you've used Tamron and Sigma quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, between all of them, you know, having the f2.8 is always nice because of low light, but whether it's Canon, Tamron, Sigma, when you go to f4, you save on the weight aspect. That's one of the biggest differences is that you're not carrying around as heavy of a lens, which some people really like if they know they don't need that extra stuff of light. I would say, you know, if you really got down to the nitty gritty, Canon and also Sigma now, their newer generations are technically going to be better looking lenses in like really, really specifics. If you were to break down, you know, zoom in 100% on one photo, but I don't think you'll really be able to notice the difference from day to day if you know you're taking photos outside, going down to f4, f5.6. They're all great lenses. Tamron is technically the cheapest of all of them, though, and so you'll probably just losing that image stabilization, which some people love. I think for photography it doesn't make a huge difference necessarily, but some people really prefer to have that option.
Cool. I'm going to pass the next question back to you. And this was asked, and I believe you answered this in the Facebook group, but I think it would be very interesting for anyone interested in the Sony a7 III, which is the brand new Sony full-frame mirrorless camera. It's around $2,000, so it's still a pretty pricey camera for most people, but it's, I would say, a really good price for the camera that you're actually getting. Whether you're getting the a7 III, the a7R2, 3, or whatever they're on, the a9, the best lenses to start with, I guess, is kind of the same question for all of those cameras. So do you have like a good starter lens kit, both for zooms and primes, that you can recommend?
Oh man, it really does come down to what type of photography you're trying to do. In terms of zooms, the 16-35 f2.8 or f4, or the 24-70 f2.8 or f4 are both outstanding lenses. If you're doing sport or wildlife, doing the 70-200 is probably preferable. Sony also came out with their 24-105 f4, which I haven't used personally, but I've heard a lot of great things about. And then in terms of primes, you know, the G Master 85 1.4, I just played around with it. Is an incredible lens. It makes a little bit of noise with the autofocus, but it's an incredible portrait lens, incredible lens to start off with. I also really love the Batis series. You do have to get into manual focus, which some people want that autofocus, but I think they're beautiful pieces of glass and relatively cheap, all things considered. It really does come down to what type of photography you're trying to get into, though. I think if you're just starting off, the 24-70 f4 is a really good starting point, or the 24-105 lens.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, this was another kind of clarification that I'll just make quickly. This was a question, I forget, I think it was asked in the class, but this idea of how capturing a moving object with that blurry background, but also getting the subject moving but sharp in focus. This is a technique that we actually showed in the course. I believe it was in the section on focus and depth of field for capturing a moving object. There's also the section, the sports and action photography section later on. But they were the student was a little confused about how that actually works, and you're literally going to be panning your camera with the moving object. So you're clicking your shutter and you're moving, and even though your camera might just be open for a split second, you're still trying to move with the motion of that subject. So ideally the subject is in the same position in your frame as you're moving along, and that's why you get the subject sharply in focus, but the background is going to be, you're going to be moving along it, so the background is blurry.
Which just takes practice, like that your subject and your camera need to be moving at almost pretty close to the same thing, so you have to be able to sort of maintain that speed, you know, faster or slower, and it just takes practice.
And we've gotten a few people who have actually posted their photos for the assignment for that section, and they look really good. So some people, congrats, because you're really practicing and your photos are looking pretty good.
I think we might be frozen here, or someone's lost the feed, but...
Okay, I hope we are still live. Let us know if you can still hear us in the chat. Our next question is, so this is again a question from, let's see who this was from. Picard was asking in class, they were having difficulty getting bokeh or bokeh in their photos using a Nikon D5600 with the 18 to 55 millimeter kit lens. So my initial reaction is one of the reasons why you might not be getting that nice, beautiful, blurry depth of field bokeh that we showed you in the class is because it's the kit lens, and that lens is going to not have as nice of a quality of bokeh. The other reason is just the ways that you're trying to get that shallow depth of field. Maybe rewatch that lesson on how you get a blurrier background. There's a few ways you can do that. You can open up your aperture, you can move the subject closer to the camera and also further from the background, and you can also zoom in more with your lens. So if you're using that 18 to 55 millimeter lens, for example, if you're at the 18 millimeters, which is fairly wide, you're not going to get as much bokeh in the background as 55 millimeters. And of course, just using a more telephoto lens in general, or maybe a better prime lens, will make your bokeh look better. Sam or Will, any sort of follow-up?
You kind of covered all that. If the 18 to 55 was the only lens that I had, and I think that's probably an f4, right? The best you're going to get out of that is shooting at 55 as wide open as you can. The longer the lens, the more glass and stuff's involved, and that creates a shallower depth of field, and then having an open f-stop as much as you can. So if the maximum amount out of that lens, shoot at 55, shoot at your f-stop, wide open as you can. And like Phil said, a prime is going to be better, wide open, bigger hole. A longer lens is going to be even better, like a 200 or a 300. Wide open is going to get your maximum amount. But yeah.
Yeah, and bokeh,
I don't know.
Watch the video on that. There's a lesson on it, and we had to dive deep into this because the background it comes from a Japanese word, and I actually had someone correct me in the last class that said that I was using the word improperly. I was saying bokeh, but they said that it's supposed to be bokeh. Who knows? It's the same thing as ISO and ISO. It's interchangeable depending on where you live. Maybe there's technically a correct way to say it, but Well, yeah, that's another question for another day. Okay, I think we got a couple more. Oh, I think this is actually our last question. And just to follow up, what should you set first, ISO, shutter speed, or f-stop?
We probably all do this differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a trick question. Sam, do you want to go first?
Oh, man. I guess typically I set the ISO first unless I'm doing something like long exposure or trying to do something really specific in terms of f-stop and whatnot. But typically I know the general lighting of where I'm going to be shooting, and so I know what ISO is going to be my like sort of base for those settings.
Okay, so Will, what about you?
Same. I mean, it depends on the situation. I think at a wedding, I always try to go the lowest ISO I can before anything. At a portrait session, I usually shoot pretty wide open, depending on the situation, and then adjust everything from there.
Yeah.
I would say typically for me, the shutter's like the last thing I care about, unless I'm shooting sports, in which case like I need to be shooting at a high shutter.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what situation you're in, at least for me, anyway.
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is there's no right answer to what you should set. Maybe depending on the situation there, or depending on what style of photography you want. But I think the student who asked that was looking for an answer of which one, and no matter what setting or situation, should I use set first? And the answer is there's no exact.
I think if you're just starting out with photography and you want to use a base thing, start with your ISO. Like, what is your camera handle? Are you outside? Start with a low ISO. Are you indoors? Start with a high ISO, and then go to f-stop, and then go to shutter, just based on what you're sitting, and then adjust from there.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the best thing for beginners to do.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's see. We are in the middle of our live stream now, and so we're going to do a couple things of housekeeping before we get to our actual photo reviews, and then opening it up to more live questions that are being chatted.
Yeah, we have lots of questions on live thing we'll get to after we do some other stuff. But
yeah, so really quickly, we're going to do housekeeping. So first of all, thank you so much for everyone who has left a review for the class. If you've watched any of our video content so far from this group, you know how appreciative we are for all of the reviews that we get. We have over 371 reviews right now, and we can truly appreciate it. If you leave a review that's anything less than a 5-star review, you've probably gotten a message and maybe even a video from me asking for some more feedback. So if you don't think it's a 5-star course, please just send us a message with ways and specific ideas for how we can make this a 5-star course for you. I get a lot of people saying, oh, well, it's too early for me to leave a 5-star review, or it's too early for me to tell. If it's too early, please just hold off on leaving a review, because even if you leave a 4.5-star review, it brings our average review score down, which hurts our course and course ranking, and we want to make sure that as many people can find this course as possible to make this community and this course as best as possible. But of course, we want you to be honest too. So if there's any ways we can make the course better, please let us know. Our goal is to get to 1,000 reviews by the end of June. So we've got a month and a half to do that. So if you haven't taken the moment to leave a review for the course, please head over to the course right now on Udemy, go to the course dashboard, and there's a little review button at the top that you can click to leave reviews, and we really appreciate it, especially if you've gone through some of the course and you're enjoying the course. We'd love to get those reviews. The contest, the second piece of housekeeping. So we are in the middle of our portrait photography contest, if you haven't been notified yet of that. That you can find in the very last section of the course, which is section number 36. And there's an assignment in there where you can post or submit your photos. So I know a lot of people just joined this class in the past week, and you might not have seen the announcement about the portrait photography competition. Make sure that when you go to the course dashboard, you click on that announcements tab, because that will show you all of the announcements from the past few weeks since we launched this course. And one of those has a little bit more information about the portrait photography competition. But that being said, we're doing a portrait photography competition. Nothing crazy. You don't have to be a professional portrait photographer. Just go out, take a portrait, upload a picture, and you're going to be included in this competition. The deadline is the end of May 31st, so you have this entire month to do it. So far, only 10 people have entered, And we're giving out prizes. We've got
Those are good odds, man.
Yeah. So they're good odds. I mean, all those people that submitted are probably like, okay, Phil, stop talking about the portrait competition. But we're giving out, I forget if the top prize, I think, is a $50 Amazon gift card. We've got a $25 Amazon gift card and a $10, or maybe a couple $25 gift cards. So you can find out all that information. Again, that's in section 36 of the course at the very end. And yeah, so
We'll have competitions every month.
we're doing 4 competitions a year right now. Maybe we'll do more.
That's right.
Once a quarter. But yeah, I think once every month might be a little bit too much for us to handle. But who knows? Maybe someday.
That's fair.
Last note. I hate talking about this so much, but Udemy playback.
Oh gosh.
We still are getting some people saying that there's playback issues. I think it's better. Myself, I re-uploaded all the content in a more compressed file size. And I didn't know this, but Udemy doesn't allow 1080p playback unless you put in a request to have your course be able to play back at 1080p. So I did that. Now you can play the course in 1080p, but that's on the auto setting. So if you go to the player on Udemy and you click play and you go to the little settings, there should be an option for auto. And if your internet is fast enough, it will play back at 1080p. It'll kind of bounce around though between 720, 1080, depending on how fast your internet is. But I feel like we haven't been getting as many complaints. If you still have issues with playback, of course you can let us know, but also know that we don't really have any solutions ourselves. There's not much we can do, and the best thing is to reach out to Udemy support. If they tell you that it's your problem and it's your browser, respond to them and say, no, I've done everything that you've asked me. It's still an issue with this course, especially if it's with this course and not other courses. Yeah. We want Udemy to know that there's something wrong with their system for this course. Maybe I've seen it in the past when a course has a ton of students in it. If there's hundreds of students trying to watch videos at the same time, maybe it's something to do with their servers or something. But anyways, sorry about playback issues. I hope that it's working out good for all of you now. And let's move on to the next topic. Okay, so the next section of our live Q&A is photo review. So we picked 5 photos at random from the Facebook group, and we're just going to go through them. And Sam and Will and I will give you some critique and also talk about what we like or what we don't like about the photos. So for anyone watching, and if we picked your photo, hopefully we don't hurt your feelings too much. But honestly, all your photos are really amazing. So let's get to the first one, which is from Dawn. So we got this beautiful sunset.
Yeah, man.
I mean, I think this was like the best photo, or not the best, but one of my favorite photos I saw from people posting. So there's really not much that I have to critique this. The symmetry is beautiful, that reflection, the colors are beautiful. Do you guys have any sort of critique or feedback for this photo?
I really like this photo. I think the only thing that I may have done would been you probably could just crop in just a little bit more from the bottom left, just to keep it even more perfectly centered. Like, to me, in my eye, there's a little bit too much space in the bottom left. So you could just crop in, just to keep the same aspect, but just cropping in. But otherwise, like, that's a pretty dope photo.
Yeah.
Sam, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, no, it's an incredible photo. One of my favorite things of landscapes and stuff like this is, I don't know how long or how much longer Dawn stood here, but I'd be really interested to know, because of how bright the sun is, when it got diffused behind the tree, 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later, when the sun's directly behind those trees, what did it look like? I mean, that'd be my only thing is to see, the sun fully diffused by that tree. But no, it's a wonderful photo. He's in the right spot at the right time. And, I don't know if that plane or wherever that is always flooded, but, yeah, it's a gorgeous photo and well edited.
Yeah,
great colors.
I feel like I'm always trying to achieve something like this, and this they nailed it.
Yeah, we got one comment saying that the rule of 6 is not being applied to this photo. I don't know what the rule of 6 is. The rule of thirds, maybe, which is true. I guess the rule of thirds is not technically being followed.
You could argue that it's
centered.
It's in the center third.
Yeah, but it's not like in one of those intersection points. That's
Square
true.
points, yeah.
But I guess the thing is, like, those are rules that are meant to be broken. It doesn't mean that
just guidelines, not something you have to
that if they followed that rule, it would necessarily be a better photo. That being said, it would have been interesting to see if there was some sort of way to use the rule of thirds with this setup and see how that photo was.
I think it'd be fun to, if they presented this photo and just did a 180 and put the reflection on top and just see what that looks like, see if that tricks a mind or like, just make it more interesting.
Great. Dave rookie mistake says the rule of thirds. Totally fine. But I think that's a great point, and I love that students are like, what about that rule that you taught us about? And it just goes to show that, like,
this goes against everything you've been saying.
Yeah, everything we say is, meant to be taken with a grain of salt, and you're the artist. So let's go to our next photo. Daniel Maslani. This is another photo posted to our Facebook group. Great long exposure technique.
Oh man.
I guess I'll say the first thing that I am kind of wondering, and you might be able to see my mouse. Yeah, you can kind of see my mouse in the video. There's so much of this sort of blank space right here, and then the top of the photo, you see this line up at the top of the rocks or the land up above. I'm curious what it would have looked like if you tilted up just a little bit, if it would have felt a little bit more balanced, or maybe just cropped it in so that we didn't even see that land up there and as much of this water down here, just because the main focus for me are all of these waterfalls right here. So I think maybe for me, cropping in just a little bit or zooming in if possible would have made it a little bit more better for me.
Yeah, I agree with the tilting down or cropping out the top. Mm-hmm. This is a great photo, this is like not the easiest thing to achieve this sort of like look. Obviously it needed to be on a tripod or sticks or something and a longer shutter. I think the color's well edited because it's a specific style. I think it's got a lot of its own kind of imagery and that low contrast look where the blacks are a little bit muddier. They're not as like crushed down. Mm-hmm. It's got that kind of Instagrammy stylistic blue.
Yeah, it's definitely a little blue. If you wanted, you might be able to warm it up a bit to get more of a natural white balance. Sometimes when you're shooting long exposures, if your white balance setting is the right setting, say it's at night and you're set to, or there's like some tungsten warm lighting and you set it to the tungsten warm lighting white balance setting, if you're doing a long exposure, because it's bringing in so much more light, it might actually end up being even warmer than you need it to be or than you want it to be. So sometimes with long exposures or white balance, it's easy to get off. Of course, that's why it's good to shoot in RAW and be able to color correct afterwards.
And they had to use use an ND filter because it's daytime. For sure. Like I've been out there trying to do this stuff. I think even in our class when we do the daytime long exposures, I have that big Lee stop filters that stops down about 9 stops or whatever.
Maybe even for this one, if they would have done a little bit of a shorter long exposure, might have been interesting. I mean, I love this photo, so I don't want to pick it apart, but maybe just a little bit shorter, because it looks like it was so long that so much of the water is just kind of a blur. Maybe getting back a little bit more detail would have been nice. I don't know. Sam, I'm going to skip you on this one and just throw this next one to you right off the bat. Let's get your opinions on this great macro photo from Kevin Gray, one of our top contributors to the Facebook group. So big shout out to Kevin. And also I'll give a shout out to some of our other top contributors. We've got John White, Donald Wyatt, Connor Watt, Matt Brundage, Alvaro Almeida, Abhijit Patel, and Preetha Chakraborty. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but really great job. Thank you so much for being the top contributors so far in the Facebook group, and we can tell that just by the number of posts and likes and stuff you've done. So anyways, speaking of Kevin Gray, who's one of our top contributors, Sam, what thoughts do you have on this photo?
Oh man, well, I see that Kevin Gray is actually here listening to this critique. But no, I love macro photography. I think catching the details, and while he could have just focused on the red of the flower, you also have this water on it. You also have the green stem and the leaf, and so that you can see a little green in the background, but it's also pretty dark. And all the colors just pop so well in this photo. And it's nice, you have a lot of details you can look at. I do kind of wish I could see the end or more to the left of the flower. But I mean, that's just like just because I'm curious. I'm just curious what, how the flower sort of looked at that point. But the curves, the lines of everything, and just the textures of the flowers, I think it's a really well composed, beautiful lighting, great macro shot. I mean, it looks like a stock photo that someone would use as their background on a Windows laptop or something.
Yeah, and I know it's probably a little bit harder for you to see because I know you're looking through the Facebook video, but it is, the only thing I will say, it is slightly out of focus. I'm not sure if that's blurred due to the motion of the flower itself. Sometimes when you're doing those macro shots, if there's just a little bit of motion to a flower, you get a little bit of that shake. So it's just slightly out of focus. I think that's something, and it looks like it's more due to motion blur than to the focus itself. And I see that it was shot at 1/50th.
But he's at a 220 millimeter and a 1/50th. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty
possible. Yeah.
So if maybe boosting your ISO to 200 or 400 and then speeding up your shutter speed to like 1/100th might have.
Windy day, he says.
Yeah, windy day.
That makes sense, man.
Yeah, 20 attempts to get it. Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the thing.
Faster shutter, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Great photo, Kevin. Thank you so much for being such a participant. So Janya posted this photo, and I believe
I saw her too, yeah.
I believe Sojanya actually I don't know if you posted any questions in the group about this photo, asking for feedback. But all in all, a pretty cool macro shot. I noticed right off the bat that the eyelashes are in focus, and that's cool if that's exactly what you meant. We always recommend trying to get the eye itself in focus, and so the pupil of the eye is slightly out of focus in this shot. Maybe having that in focus might have helped, although if the pupil was in focus, maybe the eyelashes would have been out of focus too, which might have looked a little awkward.
Yeah, it's a choice. I mean,
Yeah.
I normally would try to focus on the highlights inside the pupil, which is like a good place to look. And it looks to me like whatever position that they put this person in was done on purpose, right? Because the soft lighting on the actual face also replicates. You're also getting that eye light too. So that's really beautiful. It's a great composition and good photo.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's see.
Go ahead,
Sam.
Just the one thing I would have edited, the lights you can see, and I think this is probably from the lens, but the lights in the eyes are slightly magenta, and just in post to sort of change that color so it's white opposed to having that colored tint to it.
Yeah, and that could have maybe been a chromatic aberration setting too. Sometimes you get that
chromatic aberrations, man.
And you get a little bit of that green too. Thank you so much. We got 46 people here live, or they were here live. Thank you so much for people watching. We are going to be getting to live Q&A, just opening it up, answering any questions we got in the comments in just a moment. We got one more photo, I believe. Sarabdeep Rai just posted this like within the past hour, and they posted a few photos. This was a really nice portrait. Got a lot of cool sort of like street style portraits. For me, a couple things that come off the bat right here is you definitely made that, or I don't know if you made the decision, but you can only see one of her eyes, and that is a preference. Maybe I would have liked if her hair was just out of her face just a little bit so I could see both eyes. Definitely just a preferential thing. She's kind of awkwardly centered / just a little bit to the side. So I think compositionally I would have rather centered her directly or put her off to the side a little bit more to follow more of that rule of thirds. So those were the couple things that I would do. I love the background texture, and even the lighting's pretty nice coming. I don't know what the source of lighting was, but it's coming from more one side of her face.
It also feels like, I don't know if this is a post-editing thing or if they can let us know, but it looks like there's a little bit of vignette in the corners and then kind of centered, which brings your eye really down to her.
Yeah.
Which is great. Either, a great job editing or a happy accident, but it looks great.
There was another one of the same composition or same model and background, but it was from slightly lower and had a really nice side light, and I mean the textures of the background with that colored dress. I thought it was a really wonderful photo. But it really shows you, picking the right background for your portraits makes all the difference. This is good color contrast.
Yeah.
It makes the subject really stand out. It's, an interesting background without being too distracting. Yeah, I really enjoy this photo. Or I think I like the other one a bit more, but,
Cool. Well, thank you so much for all of these, all of your photos, and for letting us pick on you while we were, doing this first sort of photo review. Let us know in the comments if you think it would be cool for us to do a separate sort of photo critique submission sort of option for these live Q&As. The plan is for us to do a live Q&A like this every month, and to just do live question and answer. Also photo reviews. Next month, it will be after the portrait photography competition. So we'll I think we'll focus on those. So definitely take part in that competition, and we'll be going through some of those photos as well as announcing the winners during the live Q&A.
Katie Miller says she loves this.
Katie Miller, thank you for being here. Sam, I think I heard through the grapevine that you have to go. Is that true?
Yes, I have a work call I'm going to have to leave y'all for.
Well,
I can be here for a few more minutes.
Sam is, we're all professionals doing our creative photography and video production for a living. So Sam was, we're grateful to have him on the call, and we're going to figure this out so we can see his beautiful face sometime next time. So let's open it up to live Q&A. So if there's any questions that were in the chat, we'll definitely get to them right now. There might have been a few. I think there were a few from the Facebook page.
Oh, yeah, there's one I can try to attempt to tackle right now, actually.
Yeah, someone posted this to the event page, I believe, before we start. So we'll start with that. And then if you have any questions right now, go ahead and chat them in the comments.
Kevin Gray had one right here. Is a prime lens the holy grail of lenses? Is the Nifty 50 the best? If you have a crop body, will the 50mm be as great, or going with a 35mm?
Oh, that's a great question. Sam, you answer that one.
Sam, please answer this prime question.
Oh, sure, guys. Yeah. For me, zoom lenses are great because they're versatile and a lot easier to use if you don't have time to be changing. But yes, prime lenses are going to be better quality, and I think much better at the end of the day. Nifty 50. The 50mm or 35mm are just the most common because they're kind of in between the two. They're not super wide, they're not super telephoto, and so they're just more versatile prime lenses. I don't think that necessarily, it comes down to personal preference at the end of the day. But yes, I love shooting with the 35mm. I started with the 35mm on my crop sensor. And then when I moved to full frame, I still shot on 35mm, and it was a bit wider, but I loved shooting with that lens. I now shoot a lot with my Leica Q, which is a 28mm, and because it's an f1.7, I still get that shallow depth of field, which I really like, but I do miss being able to be a bit more punched in sometimes. And I think I've moved more towards enjoying the 85mm range of photography. Again, though, it really does come down to personal preference and your style of photography. Do you like that wide angle look and getting in close, up and personal with someone, or do you like more telephoto, standing farther back and sort of sneaking in to get the shot? Yeah, does that make sense? Do you guys have opinions on that?
I don't think prime lenses are the holy grail of all lenses. I think you can achieve a very specific look. Sam's laughing because we've been having this discussion for like the last 2 days, really, about another shoot. So
last 7 years.
I love prime lenses for what they are in specific. I tend to shoot a lot of more events. And actually, Megan actually asked a question about wedding rehearsal event photography tips. I would use a zoom all the time when shooting a wedding rehearsal or a wedding in general, because I can move in and out faster. I'm not going to miss moments by having to change lenses. I will be able to basically capture stuff from a distance that won't affect my subject. I don't want my subject to know that I'm there. And so I'll be able to achieve, I think, better, more personal photos with a longer lens, a longer zoom, less prime work. But when I'm shooting portraits, I do like using a prime lens. But I have time when I'm shooting portraits.
And I mean, of course, there's or may not, of course, but there's definitely like benefits to either. Sometimes primes can be cheaper. Sometimes it's cheaper to get a wider aperture so you can do better in low light. But of course, with the zoom, you have the range of the focal length range, which gives you all those options while shooting. So,
now, can't you just walk in or walk out to get wider or more zoomed in, though?
Dude, this is the thing.
See, no, you can, yeah, for most situations,
you can,
but
until
not
they notice you walking in.
Yeah, or not at a wedding. You can't get all the frames that you want, all the compositions you want.
I can still achieve some of the same look on a nice zoom lens that I can on like a nifty 50. That being said, that
1.4,
that 70 to 200 lens is a lot heavier. So after 8 hours of shooting a wedding, it's nice to have that light prime. I get it.
So the ideal setup is to have like two cameras
with all the lenses.
Yeah, two cameras with. I guess you could have two primes or one prime on each lens.
I think it just comes down to style and what you want to do, and how you shoot. Really, I think that's the big thing.
Yeah. Actually, we're just gonna keep rolling with the questions that we have in the chat, and we'll get to all the other questions that have been posted before, just in case people, to make it more interesting for people who are watching live. Really quickly, a prime lens, Katie Miller, just to follow up on this question. We've got some great lessons on prime and zoom lenses in the class, in the lenses section. But basically, a prime lens is one that does not zoom. It is one fixed focal length, meaning that, watch the lesson in the class about what a focal length is. That's the problem with photography. It's like, I'm like, okay, now I have to explain what focal length means. But yeah, basically you can't zoom in or out with a prime lens. That's the easiest way.
You can't change the zoom. So it's like 50 millimeters, a prime lens. There's nothing else. Whereas a zoom would be 18 millimeter to whatever, 55 millimeters. So anywhere in between you can zoom. But a prime is just 1 millimeter.
Yeah. All right, we got a question from Evie Strange. Says, I have several different lenses that came with different cameras. They are all Nikon. Are they interchangeable?
I think Sam answered it, but most Nikon lenses, the Nikon system was so great about Nikon is like most have been able to interchange almost throughout their entire length.
Yeah.
I think even Sam had, what was that? You had a D800 and you were using some older Nikon lenses from a film camera, and they fit on.
I had like a 1970s prime lens, and I could use it either on my film camera or my digital. And I mean, it's really the reason I love Nikon is you can use these old lenses with no adapter. Canon has changed their adapters or their lens mounts many times over the years, though.
The only thing that
as have most.
I will say though, the only thing that will be a problem is the older lenses will not have necessarily like communication. So if you use an older Nikon lens on a newer Nikon body, you'll have to physically change the f-stop on the lens. And doing backwards, if you use a newer Nikon lens that doesn't have a physical aperture ring and you put it on an older film Nikon camera, you won't be able to change the f-stop because it's internal. So you just have to be aware of that stuff.
Yes. Okay, cool. More questions. Let's see. Any more questions? Shout out to everyone who's watching right now. Dave, Jay, Corey, Katie again, Kevin again, John. Everyone who's watching right now, big shout out. Thank you so much. We hope you're enjoying it. Let's see. When shooting portrait, is 50 millimeters f1.8 a good lens?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a very good lens for a lot of reasons. Although I just was commenting on an assignment. The name escapes me right now, but they were doing, and you can see in the Facebook group, but they had a portrait of a dog and a woman kissing the dog. And sometimes when you're shooting portraits of dogs, their nose is farther from their eyes. And so using a 1.8 50 millimeter, there's only so much in focus that you can get. So you just have to be cautious of the type of portrait you're doing and how much in focus you want it there to be.
Sam, any follow-up? Nope.
Yeah, I mean, I think having a fast prime lens is great, and typically more telephoto is great for portraits. You know, the one benefit to using an 85 millimeter or longer focal length for portraits is that you don't have to shoot at f1.4, but you can shoot at f4 and still get that nice shallow depth of field. But the biggest thing is always, subject placement, background, having some distance there so you get the out of focus background, nice lighting. But typically and traditionally, the 50 millimeter is a great lens for portraits.
Yeah. We got a couple questions about back button focusing. One is, what is back button focusing, and do we have any thoughts about it? Do we use it? Will, Sam, you want to take that?
I've used it in different ways throughout my photography career.
To quickly explain what back button focusing is generally if you are using your camera with autofocus, I believe, right? Yeah. You press your shutter button, the big button that you take a picture with, and you half press that, and that will autofocus your lens. And then you complete the press, and it will take the shot. With back button focusing, there you can assign. Sometimes it's automatically assigned, but often you have to program your camera to assign a specific button to lock that focus down with the back button, and then you just use the shutter button to take the photo. So it's kind of like it's definitely like a stylistic preferred thing, but I think a lot of professionals end up liking to use back button focusing because it allows them to lock it down with that back button, not worrying about having to half press or focus getting changing when you press the shutter button.
Yeah, when I was shooting Nikon on the D800, I would always use the back button focus. I turned off the focus on the shutter because I just didn't want to wait for it. And I would actually I would aim, use the button, find focus, let go, and then it was locked to just take pictures all day. But now on my Fuji, the focus for me is so much faster and better on some of the lenses I have that I just do it like normal. So it's just your style of shooting. Yeah,
we have I think Sam wrote a pro tip article in the class on back button focusing if people want to have more information about what it is. We got a question from Robin. I love this one. Any tips on taking photos of strangers in street photography?
That's all, Sam.
Do you have a common approach to asking their permission to take their photo? Actually, one thing I'm going to try to do is I created a street photography class with our mutual friend Anthony Carbajal.
Oh, yeah.
Who's an amazing street photographer. And he gave a lot of great advice for approaching strangers. And there's basically two I would say put two camps in the street photography world. There's a lot of professionals and famous street photographers who will literally just go up, stick a camera in the middle in your face and take a photo. They don't want you to pose. They don't care if you want their photo taken. I forget his name, but there's a famous photographer in New York who used to do this all the time. And so that's definitely one approach, but it's also probably not the approach that I would prefer. The other approach is going up and asking people to take their photo. Depending on where you live, it's probably okay. I'm not going to say probably because it depends on where you live, but in some places it's totally fine to take pictures of people in public. If they're in a public place, they have basically waived their right to not be photographed. Of course, this might be different if it's commercial or not. So again, that's why I think you have to ask and find out the rules for where you live. We're speaking to a worldwide audience. So you definitely don't have to ask in all places, but I would prefer asking. I don't know. Sam, you have any thoughts or?
I prefer asking.
I have lots of thoughts.
Yeah.
But no, it is a cultural thing, and I've through my travels been in places where I would never take someone's photo without asking. I wouldn't feel not only comfortable but safe doing so. And so there's that school of thought of taking photos without people noticing and just being as sneaky as possible. There's other places. I was just in New Orleans, and everyone I went up to, not a single person told me no. And I would just go up and introduce myself, say, hey, I'm going around taking photos of portraits of people. Could I take your photo? And everyone was really nice and said sure, like didn't care at all. I think you have to know your community, know where you are, you're comfortable enough to just go up to someone. I think it's a very New York thing to just go up into some stranger's face and take their photo. So it does come down to where you're living and knowing that area. I also know that some people, because you don't want that posed shot, there's this one photographer that would ask to take someone's photo, and then they would sort of step back, and then they'd slowly lean in and see how close they could get before the person reacted, and then take the photo at that exact moment. And it created this awesome sort of like, it looked like they had just walked up to the person to take their photo because they had this weird look on their faces like, what are you doing? And so, I think it's all about getting comfortable with where you're taking photos. If you're traveling, like, please be careful. Know the community you're in. Typically, taking photos of kids is fine, but some adults might get really angry about it. In some cultures, it's disrespectful to do that. So just be mindful of your surroundings when you're doing that. But yeah, typically, being a personable person and being able to go up and just talk with them and share a conversation, and don't make it just that you're there to take their photo, but you're actually interested to talk to them, or maybe you're going to have to offer them some money or some food or something like that. But yeah, it's a tricky thing to learn how to do well, and there's no one way about doing it either.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully that answered your question. We got a ton more. Thank you everyone for asking all these great questions. Donald Wyatt asked, when I was learning, they believed the 105 millimeter was ideal for portraits. Is this still applicable? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think most longer lenses are nice for. I mean, sometimes I'll even shoot at 200 on the 70-200 for a portrait. But I think it's mostly about getting kind of that bokeh and that fall off. An 85, a 50, a 105, those are probably the most common portrait lenses that I would use. But,
yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of preferential, though. Some people love shooting wide portraits. So.
Yeah, some people like getting right up in your face. I mean, I guess it just depends on how you work with your subject, too. Like, even that what Sam was talking about, like, creating a situation where you can make a reaction, or if you just want them to be calm, if you're with someone where you feel like you need to step back a little bit. It just kind of depends on what you're shooting.
Yeah. We got another question from, I do not know how to pronounce your name. Sorry. Kao Silva. Kawe. I'm so sorry. Says, guys, I took my camera, the Canon T3i, to draw with light. So obviously I decreased the shutter speed too much. But later, when I tried some shots with the normal settings in manual mode, the photos got too dark. Example, the shutter speed was 1/60th, ISO 800, and aperture f/25. The image gets too dark, but when I change the ISO to automatic or turn on the flash, the image gets normal.
That f/25
that's
would probably be why it's too dark in most situations anywhere. f/25 is like pretty close down.
Yeah. I mean, that's gonna, if you want to make it darker, I guess like the thing is if you are slowing down your shutter speed to be able to do the drawing with light, and it's too bright, then yeah, you would close down your aperture. But if it's too dark, then you would want to open up your aperture.
Right. Well, I think he went to shoot later afterwards. That's what I'm getting from this. But he couldn't take a picture because it wasn't working. I think because one of your settings was too dark, and then when you went to auto, it was fine. So the auto must have turned off.
Maybe if you have a follow-up question or more info, let us
know. Give us a little bit more detail. Maybe we can figure that out for you.
Kevin Gray says, I love your guys' accents. And this is the beauty of Udemy and teaching a worldwide accent. And we are so self-centered that I'm like, I don't have an accent. But then, like, obviously over this time of teaching online classes, everyone thinks I have an accent. And we probably all do, coming from... everyone has accents depending on where you're coming from, but we're all California natives, and yes, there's definitely things that we don't pronounce and that we pronounce. Yes, button. Someone gave me a bad review in one of my classes. It wasn't the photo class, it was my Adobe Premiere Pro class, because the whole time I'm saying, okay, click this button, click this button.
Click this button.
But it's button.
Button.
Not button, Phil. It's button. So if I pronounce button the wrong way, please don't give me a bad review just for that. That's the point. Okay, so let's see. We got questions galore. Corey Hicks asked, I don't know if anybody asked, but is it better to shoot in RAW or JPEG or both? Oh, we got a great lesson on this, but we can answer it here too.
Yeah, if you're going to edit and have some post-processing, obviously RAW is going to be the best possible thing for you to shoot in. There are situations where you may want to shoot JPEG if you need to, get it out fast, or you need to edit to your phone quickly. You can also convert RAWs. I think someone else mentioned you can convert RAWs in camera on some cameras to a JPEG to then get it to your phone. I actually had a job the other day. You guys may have seen me post. I was on a boat, and I had to drop off the photos immediately to the other photographer I was working with. And just to be safe, since I have dual SD slots, I sent RAWs to one and JPEGs to the other, so that I could drop off the RAW card with her, and then I could have the JPEGs for backup. I probably could have just done RAWs on both ends, but I had less space on the other card, so JPEGs took up less space. So
I mean, the thing is, too, if you're just going to be posting to social media or online and you don't want to or need to be doing a lot of editing, sometimes shooting in RAW is just overkill. So especially if you're doing an event or something and you're shooting a ton of photos. I mean, I would say I generally shoot in RAW and JPEG all the time, so I have both options.
Yeah.
Someone asked a couple times, I believe it was, let's see, Gurgly, sorry, I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Vasi. You're asking if we can review photos right now. We don't really have a way of bringing up photos unless maybe you post it to the group right now and hashtag live, and maybe we could search through your photos right now and do some live reviewing of your photos, but then we won't be able to bring it up on the screen, so scratch that. We're gonna do this another way next time, and we're gonna be getting people to submit photos just to make it easy. We're just gonna be going live for another 10-15 minutes. It's been over an hour now, so
really?
Let's see. Let's go to their next question. Zita asks, how long does a DSLR last? How long does a shutter last?
Ooh.
I mean, I think it depends on the camera. Sometimes there's a certain shutter count that some cameras are known to go up to and then kind of die. But it all depends on how much you use a camera.
Yeah, and how much you treat it. I think everything's different. I think the standard is supposed to be between 200 and 300,000 shutter clicks or something like that.
200,000?
200,000, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, 200,000 to 300,000. But it depends. And you can check your shutter count usually by using the metadata in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more about how many photos you take than how many years or something like that.
Yeah, it's just how you treat your equipment.
Yeah.
Kind of like a car, I guess how many miles you put on it.
Yeah. Let's see. Katie Miller asks, how do you get a black background when your subject is bright, like in the flower photo?
Sam?
Yeah, Sam, take
Well,
this.
it's all about the lighting, right? So having your subject, what would be an example for this? So let's say you're standing next to a tree, and so you have a lot of shade in the background, and then you'd bring your subject to be standing, outside of that shade with, light actually touching them, or hitting them. That would then make them in a brighter setting, whereas the space behind them is much darker. Thus, and then you can have it get darker. With that flower, maybe he's, looking towards the ground or looking into the bush or something. So the flower had light on it, but the background didn't have light on it. And so there's that difference in lighting there. In the natural world, that's sort of how you would do it. If you want to do this, yourself, you would use a flash type of thing. And that flash would just hit your subject and not hit the background, thus making a difference in exposure there. Right, guys? Is there any other way?
Yeah, the background has got to be darker than the foreground to get that dark background.
Subject, yeah.
So it's either something that's just naturally that way, or you can maybe manipulate it in a way of moving the flower, moving yourself to a different angle, or I guess if you're really into it, you can bring, something that a dark poster board or something. I mean, you see a lot of those sort of macro photos with the pure black background. That could be someone professionally lighting something with lights, or at least bringing a dark black board, and some post-processing too to crush those darks and those blacks. Let's see. We got more questions. I know we do. What is the best brand of clear filters to protect your lens that's not too expensive?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I usually use Tiffin.
Tiffin's probably like one of the best known.
I think they
fairly affordable.
A fairly affordable like UV filter that's like pretty cheap.
Hoya, I think, is another good one.
Hoya's probably even cheaper actually.
I mean,
Tiffin, Hoya, ProMaster, B&W is not cheap though.
Yeah, I
I
would
think
say
Tiffin and Hoya are probably the best. Though.
that's probably like the best, and they're not too expensive. I mean, you can get cheap plastic ones, and honestly, for most people, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference, and you probably won't be able to tell the difference between that and using a more expensive glass or plastic one. But I would check out Hoya or Tiffin. Hoya is Hoya. Okay, so let's see. Lena asks, would a ring flash work for the dark background?
Yeah.
I mean, using a flash that lights your subject but falls off enough in the background so that it doesn't hit the background would definitely work.
Those ring flashes are meant to just focus into just in front of you versus outputting a lot, so that would work.
Question, how...
It's also having...
Go ahead, Sam.
Sorry. It's also having that color contrast, so having darker colors in the background, having the skin tones and what they're wearing being a bit brighter, like that'll also help create that sort of difference in just like contrast there. So, yeah.
How much Mark Thompson asks, how much do teleconverters affect the sharpness of photos? I mean, I think it depends on the quality of the teleconverter, but some are meant to not affect it, right? So.
No, they pretty much always affect it. It might be minimal, but it does, at least from what I've seen, slightly affect it. And they still look great. They still are sharp, but they do, compared to not using it, I think they are slightly less sharp. Mm-hmm. But I've only used sort of the high-end Canon ones, which, you lose a stop of light or 2 stops of light. Mm-hmm. And so you're shooting at a higher f-stop, which more is in focus at that point. So maybe you don't notice the difference too much, but, if you're using a cheaper one, it will definitely reduce the sharpness.
Got it. Okay. Good to know. Let's see. We've got Katie Miller asks, do you recommend a flash attachment?
Ooh, yeah.
I'm talking about an external flash or what?
I think they're talking about a flash that goes on top of your flash to diffuse the light. I assume that's what you guys are asking. An attachment like that. The most popular and basic one that I've used has been the Gary Fong one. Mm-hmm. That's always my go-to. I actually used to have, and I lost it, and I need to rebuy it. I don't use a flash that much, but it was like a bounce card sort of attachment where you shoot the flash straight up. There's a white card that attaches to your flash, and then there's another cover right here. And in film lighting, that's called a book light, where it shoots in and then it's diffused out. And that's been my favorite one. The Gary Fong sort of does the same thing, and it's even more 360. But I would say a bounce card sort of style is my favorite type of flash attachment. Yeah,
we have a couple lessons in the class where you can check out how that actually looks. I think there's an external flash lesson where we were shooting inside, and then there was also one where we were shooting outside, and Will was showing the different ways that, with the Gary Fong filter, shooting straight through it, shooting through the side of it, or shooting up, how it looks. So you can kind of get a sense of how it might change.
Yeah, and I think diffused light is nice, but having bounced diffused light is even better than the Gary Fong thing in my experience in shooting events and stuff like that.
Yeah. Cool. Katie was asking about external, so maybe...
Yeah, those are for external.
Oh, yeah,
flashes,
that's external. Well, and we recommend an external flash, too. It's definitely a stylistic thing. And for event photographers, definitely. So I think, Katie, were you asking about the wedding stuff?
Was she?
Maybe someone else was. But for weddings, if you're shooting events and you're indoors, again, it's a stylistic thing, but sometimes it's just necessary to have a flash so that you can expose properly, especially when getting photos of people dancing. A lot of wedding photographers and weddings, they want you to be taking photos of people or going around from table to table, getting all the people. So having a flash is definitely not necessary, but I'd say it's good to have in your kit if you're an event photographer.
Yeah, if you're shooting an event, it's definitely good.
Yeah. Okay, man, are people liking this live Q&A or what? Because we're getting a lot of questions. Hit that like button. Make sure that you are giving us some thumbs up if you're enjoying this live stream. And if you haven't done so yet, please leave a review for the Udemy for the course on Udemy. That, we're not trying to sell anything here. We're not trying to promote anything else. All we ask is if you can give us a review on Udemy. Thank you so much for all the likes, the hearts, the smiley faces. Really appreciate it. All right, so we got a couple more questions. Actually, let's go over to these questions before we go. Well, let's answer Gail's question, and then we're going to answer all the questions that we had from before.
I was just typing out to her, but
oh, you were okay.
It's okay, I can say it.
Yeah. What was?
I think. Wait, her question is: will lens filter help when shooting under a pavilion where the light outside is super bright and the light under the pavilion is more shade-like? Sam, do you have any filters that you use? But I don't know. I don't know as if it depends on the direction you're shooting, and if it's an event, you have to be moving around all the time. But a lens filter for like an ND might help. But I don't know. I would stay away from lens filters.
I mean, there's not really a filter that's gonna cut down the highlights and leave the darks and the shaded part of your photo not underexposed.
And I don't know if you're looking out or looking in, but if you're using a tripod and kind of very set frame, a gradient could work in that setting of
depending on
reducing the light, the bright side, and then the other, the bottom half is more in the shade, or you flip it upside down and do the opposite effect. But with contrast and lighting, typically the gradient ND is going to be your best bet there.
Yeah. All right, let's get to a few more questions, and then if anyone has any last questions in the Q&A, we'll go another 10-15 minutes, and we'll wrap it up at 3:30 our time, so that's in 15 minutes. But we got 3 questions that were posted to the group before, or the event before. One is, I have 2 lenses. One is a kit lens, the Canon 18 to 55 millimeters. The other is a Tamron 70 to 300. But I have found it difficult to click macro images with both of them. What could be the reason for this? Also, I find that manual focus on both lenses are not top-notch, as in I cannot go too close to the subject to click the picture. How do I address the same? Also, what kind of lens would you suggest for portrait photography among the 2 lenses mentioned in the post?
I think those 2 lenses that she was talking about are not necessarily macro lenses. So that's going to be probably the reason why you're having a hard time doing the macro stuff. A lot of lenses have what's called a critical focus or a close focus. They just will only focus so far or so close.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to, use those as a close focus, you need to have a lens that will focus that close. I mean, even if you're shooting like a 200 millimeter way far away, you can step back and that will help. But I
mean, this. I'm looking up this Tamron because honestly I didn't know what this lens was. It does call it a macro zoom lens, and a lot of those sort of kit zoom lenses will say macro, and it might technically be macro, but it doesn't mean you're going to be able to get those super close up macro shots that you see online, and that has to do with that close focus. I'm trying to figure out how close. The close focus for this lens might be 7 feet. So that would mean you're not going to be able to focus on anything closer than 7 feet away. And so that's pretty far if you're trying to get a super macro shot zoomed in of like me sitting right here with a flower right here, that would be, that awesome shot that you're going for. So some of that has to do just with the lens itself. In terms of the focus, that could be a combo of the lens quality, also depending on your camera. Some cameras just aren't as good at autofocusing. Also depending on where your autofocus point is, what your autofocus setting. We have some great lessons in the course on changing the autofocus setting in terms of how your camera actually chooses what to focus on. Does it choose what's dead in the center versus can you select a point in your frame and tell it to focus on that thing? That might be something to play with. And if all you're trying to do is focus on what's exactly in the center, use that autofocus setting so it's always there. And also for macro photography, one of the things we taught in the macro photo section was that you might not want to be on auto, rather just set it to manual, and instead of trying to adjust the focus with the focus ring itself, just move your body in and out just slightly, because you'll be able to get something in focus or out of focus just with slight motion of your body, because you are so zoomed in. So hopefully that answers that question. Let's see, we got another one from the same person, I believe. Question about time-lapse and slow motion videos. Are there modules for these, or are they not covered? And if there are no modules, can you give some small tips on how they can be captured on DSLR? I use by Sam. Sam's gone. He had a business call. Can you give some small tips on how these can be captured on a DSLR? I have a Samsung Galaxy Note 8, and so I know both these features are built in on the phone, but what about a DSLR? So just to cover, if this stuff is covered in the class, we are staying away from a lot of the video sides of using your camera, and we don't have a time-lapse section, but this is something that someone did ask for, so it's on our to-do list as a new section that we're going to be adding sometime in the next, hopefully, couple months. Which time-lapse is some kind of like photography kind of video.
It's somewhere in between, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like settings, like different cameras, like will do, like your iPhone or a lot of phones will create time lapses by using the video function. But traditionally, the way you really create a raw time lapse is through lots of still photos. And there's no real. We haven't really like set up a class for it because even if you take enough photos, you have to go into the post editing, and that is now video editing.
Yeah.
Because you still have to create the video of the time lapse. The raw materials for that are obviously just still photos. The best tip I can give before going way deep into that is to put your camera on some sort of priority mode, whether it's shutter, f-stop, or whatever. Because if you're going to do like a day-long exposure or a day-long time lapse or something, the light's going to change outdoors, and you want your camera to be able to keep up with it and make sure it's locked off, and yeah, kind of just make sure your composition is great, because once you start going, you go. I mean, it gets really complicated because you have to calculate how long you want your final video to be. Videos are either 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. Mm-hmm. You got to calculate how many seconds you're going to be shooting, how much photos that's going to take, how much space it's going to take, and then you got to edit all those photos, or you got to edit in the video. So it's a big process, but I mean, we could go through it at some point.
Yeah, I think we'll add that section to the course if people are interested in. In terms of the slow motion, we have a course on video production. All three of us actually put together the video production boot camp. If you're interested in making videos, and a lot of the times it's with the same cameras that you're using for this photo class, it's kind of the same style where we go over all the things you would imagine for creating videos, but that is out of the scope of this class. So yeah, we don't get too much into video stuff. We got a question from something's buzzing.
It's your phone.
My phone is somewhere. We do have a question about recommended macro lenses, and Kevin, who was it? Someone recommended a good one. Kevin Gray, the 105 macro lens is a good one. There are some great 100 to 105 lenses for most cameras, like the Nikon makes one, Canon makes one, Sigma makes one, probably for both Nikon and Canon. The cool things about the 100 is that the close focus is about 30 centimeters. So compare that with the 7 feet that is on that Tamron. 31 centimeters is like a foot or so away. So you can literally be this close to something 105 millimeters is pretty close up, especially if you're using a crop sensor. And so that's going to be really, really zoomed in onto whatever you're looking at. So definitely check out the 105 Sigma, the 100 Canon, and I believe it's the 100 Nikon as well. And they probably make one for Sony that's about the same. Big shout out to everyone watching still. Matt Brundage, thanks for being here. Jay, thank you so much for being here. We got a couple more questions. If you have any more last ones, post them into the chat.
Get a little tired of chatting and talking, huh?
Yeah. We got one more here from before, or a couple. When it comes to portrait photography, how do you choose your locations?
Ooh.
And is it better to do a full-scale photo shoot outdoors or indoors, considering there's no lighting equipment available? Also, some useful resources for inspiration in portrait photography.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to find my phone, and you are going to answer this. And we could talk about what we're doing actually after we're going.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
After we're doing this live stream, and it's totally exactly what you asked, and about finding locations. As some of you probably don't know, most of you don't know, but some of you may know, my wife and I are expecting twin boys in August. And so Will is taking our maternity photos. Isabel is about 6 months now, 5.5 months. And with twins, she's definitely showing. And so it's the perfect time to go take some nice maternity photos. We're actually planning to do a little lesson, probably just kind of a recap with some of our favorite poses and what went into getting those poses that we'll be putting in the course later. But yeah, in terms of picking a location, what are some of the things you think of? I'm going to find my phone.
Yeah. So I think the big thing for me is depending on what type of portrait you're doing. Like today we're doing some maternity photos. And so I'm coming out to San Dimas, which is a little bit farther from where I live. And so Phil and Isabel have sort of picked the locations that they want their photos to be in because they're locals. I think if you're a portrait photographer or a headshot photographer, getting familiar with the area that you live in is probably the best case scenario. Understanding where the shadows are wherever you're going to shoot, understanding where the sun is going to be when you're going to shoot, understanding what the background's going to look like. So, take all those things into consideration. Like, where's the sun? Is the background going to be like a parking lot with trash, or is it going to be like a fence with ivy around it? Or is it going to be out in a plain field? So, like, it just depends on like where you are. But getting familiar with stuff and actually going out and shooting it yourself and testing before you take a client out there or before you take someone out there that's that you don't want to waste your time basically. So scouting, finding that kind of location is great. As far as setting up a whole photo shoot, indoors or outdoors without any equipment, outdoors obviously going to be easy. I think we talk about this in the lighting section. Like using the sun is free. The only problem is you're worried about timing, so you have to be aware of A, your location, is there shade or is it bright sunlight, and B, do you want to position them where the sun is lower or higher? When you have the sun during the middle of the day, it's really harsh and it's coming right down on you, and you get shadows under your eyes. In the evening during golden hour when the sun is just setting is probably the best time to shoot, although you're going to be racing the sun.
Yeah.
And your location, maybe there's mountains, so the sun might be down before you even know it. And then positioning so that the sun comes into the backlight. I think in our portrait section, I take a 0 to hero sort of portrait of you, and we go through all this stuff. So definitely check out that portrait section. And then for inspiration, I'll go back to like Instagram, man. Instagram has like some of the coolest portrait inspiration that I've seen. And Pinterest. I'd say between those two things, you can kind of search for portraits.
And honestly,
and get some cool thoughts,
for looking for backgrounds and locations to shoot at, and this is going to be like in your town, search for places in your area and then search for like that place and then photos or engagement photos, because other photographers might have been to a park or something in your area and shot before. And that's what I did before today, actually, when we were picking locations for our maternity shoot. And I was searching for different parks because I know these parks and I know that I think they would look good, but actually online there's a lot of photographers who have blogs who share a bunch of photos from their own shoots, and it's cool to see like what locations they used or whatever. So definitely do that. And then in terms of like the length and being outdoors and having enough light, I think the thing to remember too is like you don't want to go too long with the portrait session. I mean, an hour is like kind of the max that I would say is you want to be going out and taking photos. It's somewhat tiring for people to be posing and standing there, especially if it's in the middle of the day or in sunlight. So definitely take that into consideration. So yeah, I think we nailed that one, hopefully. Thank you everyone for the congratulations for the twins. We'll definitely be sharing the journey as we go. So yeah, they're due in August. Life-changing because it's my first kids, so it's going to be crazy. But excited. We're very excited. We had one more question about any rehearsal dinner photo tips. Did we talk about that?
Just briefly. I mean, it's tough because every situation is going to be different, but this applies to most event and wedding photography and rehearsal dinner stuff. Is if you can scout the location first, that's a good tip. Check it out, test shots with your camera before you start shooting stuff. Just be aware of what's happening. If you can understand the schedule of events, when speeches are, find your spot before everyone starts filing in and you're rushing around. The big tip for that type of event and that type of stuff is know your settings first and know your positions. After that, just be at the ready for anything. Because if you don't have to mess with your settings and where you're going to stand while you're shooting, your mind will be focused on framing and watching what's going on. So that's probably the best couple quick tips I can give.
Yeah, cool. Man, well, everyone, thank you so much for watching. I think we're going to wrap it up. If you guys don't have any more questions, definitely a fun experience chatting to you guys and chatting with you guys and girls. Sorry if I keep saying guys. It's just this California thing, maybe.
Thanks, dudes.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you for just making this class so engaging and exciting and a community. That was part of the reason why we wanted to create this new version of the class, to start from scratch, to open up the student Facebook group, and everyone is posting some great photos. We're so inspired by it. Thank you for your patience for us getting feedback to you. We are trying to get feedback to all of the assignments within a day or so, and we've been pretty good at that, but it's a lot. So
when some of us start to have babies, it might be harder.
Yeah. So we'll figure out how that's gonna work. But
and thanks for everyone for just thanking us. I mean, it's so cool to see you guys appreciate doing this. I think when we see that, it makes us want to do it more. And I really like these live sessions. I feel like we get a lot of information out. So thank you guys for interacting with us. We've been trying to keep up with the chats and stuff.
And sorry if we didn't get to anyone's questions or comments. Just feel free to post them in the group or on the Q&A in the course, and we'll get back to you in the next day or so. And last but not least, leave a review for the class on Udemy if you haven't done so yet. Hopefully you think it's a 5-star course. If you don't, just let us know what we can do to make it a 5-star course for you, and we'll make sure that we implement that right away. And we've already done that with a lot of people's comments who've given us advice or there's been little mistakes or things like that. So we're doing our best, trying our best. So anyways, thank you so much. Have a great day, beautiful week, and continue to enjoy the class. And take your portrait photos and submit it to the portrait photo competition. And our next live stream will be at the middle of June, where we'll announce the winners of that competition and be doing more photo feedback and taking questions.
Cool.
Bye, everyone.
See you guys.
See ya.